Ladies and gentlemen, goobers and ghouls, dear listeners, welcome back to Fear Boners. Welcome back to Fear Boners, presented by the Down in Front Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew, and with me this evening, again, some witches straight from Salem. Back by high demand, we have Chrissy and Maddox, our two top-notch researchers who dig into the guts of these movies that we watch. Why we watch them, we don't know, but we watch them for you guys, and We have another fun, dusty, dry documentary that we're going to discuss this evening. Chrissy and Maddox, how are you guys doing this evening?
Great.
Yeah.
How are you?
Everybody's super excited.
Super hot. It's very hot in here.
It's very hot. It's very hot. We shut off the air conditioning so we could record with no noise pollution, but I feel like we're going to have very high heat pollution in a little bit.
It's going to get really swampy in here. Which
really
ties in the
swampy.
documentary.
Oh, whoa.
There are a couple swamps in this documentary. Good call. So yes, bear with us, folks. We will be talking about the very apt Bridgewater Triangle documentary, filmed and created and released back in 2013. So this might be one of the oldest movies we've talked about actively here on Fear Boners. But we figured, because it carries a lot of supernatural weight, and it is a New England original, being up here just outside of Boston where we're recording and where we're based out of, we thought it'd be a good idea to check it out and talk about it, and maybe talk a little bit about our own supernatural experiences. But before we get into that, we're going to have our regular introduction of what we're drinking and what we're recently watching. So, who would like to start? You guys want to fight?
Maddox pointed at me, so I guess she wins. Fight. What was the question?
What are you drinking right now, and what are you watching?
So I'm currently drinking Del Mega Vita Mezcal with a side of water, because it's hot as hell. And I've been watching, I'm no longer currently watching because I just finished it, but I feel like it's worth mentioning, the Sharp Objects, which is HBO limited series.
I heard that was really good.
It's awesome, and it's really tense and spooky. The last episode just aired this week, and I watched it the old-fashioned way, like as the episodes came out all summer. So, yeah, basically the premise is that this journalist from St. Louis, her name is Camille in the show. Her editor makes her go back to her hometown, which is this, like, you know, one traffic light town in southern Missouri, to investigate and write about these two little girls got murdered like a year apart from each other, and obviously there's suspicion that they're linked and all this stuff. And she gets stuck staying with her crazy family, and her mom is just this like really weird Southern belle lady who has a lot of strange idiosyncrasies where she's like pulling her eyelashes out when she gets nervous, and you're like, something's up with her. And yeah, it's hard to talk about without giving too much away, but it's very spooky. You're not sure if it's a ghost story or if it's a murder or if it's both. And I'm still not even sure, having finished it. But it's very tense. Don't watch it before you go to bed, because you're going to need to watch cartoons, like, to cleanse your palate afterwards. But, yeah, it's awesome. It's beautifully shot. Great music.
Nice.
Highly recommend.
Yeah, I heard a lot of people in my office talking about it today, because it just finished up yesterday or over the weekend?
Yeah, I think the last episode came out on Sunday.
Okay, yeah. A lot of the girls in my office were like losing their mind, and like one of the
Yeah.
girls was like, "Don't spoil it," and like a lot of HBO stuff is like that. So now I think maybe that's what I'll do this long Labor Day weekend is sit down and watch that.
Yeah, it's great. I think it's only like 8 episodes or something like that, so it's not like a crazy.
I can lay in bed for 8 hours.
I know, that's what I mean.
Would you say that the theme or the relationship between mother and daughter is like a big part of the show?
Absolutely.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So it's a huge, like, central theme
Yeah.
of it, because there's also Camille, the main character. Her mom, I believe, remarried, and Camille seems like she's probably in like her 30s, but she has a 15-year-old half-sister who lives in the house with her parents that she's staying in, and her sister's also a little crazy, and there's a lot about that too, and the relationship between her and her sister and her mom. So I would say, yeah, that's definitely a huge.
Just weird.
And there you do learn some stuff about the mother's relationship with the grandmother. So it's all many generations of being fucked up. Basically.
Well, I was going to say it kind of goes in hand with our previous episode that Shay and I recorded about like the theme of like motherhood in horror movies and how it's becoming this big trend. It's been there the whole time. There's a lot of older movies that deal with it, but recently there's been a whole crop of new movies. So Shay, if you're listening, you might want to check out Sharp Objects. But yeah, that also, the last one we did, Hereditary, also very similarly weird, fucked up relationships with mother-daughter stuff. Well, cool. Thanks for letting us know about that one.
Yeah, no problem.
And Maddox, what are you drinking? What are you watching?
I am drinking Lagunitas 12th of Never Ale because I had 2 cans left in my fridge and I didn't want to stop and buy a beer on the way over here.
Why would you keep a tropical bird in your fridge?
That's such an emphatic endorsement.
Where else do you keep them? What I'm watching.
Forget the question like this one over here. Yeah. Like, what is the heat? Is the heat frying your brains?
So I'm watching 2 very different things. I'm super late to the train on Preacher. So I've been catching up on Preacher, which I blew through the first season like a week or 2 ago. And I just like wasn't mentally ready for the second season. Just, I don't know, my brain was like, you're not ready yet, you need to stop. And so finally last night I was like, alright, I'm gonna do it and watch the first episode. And yeah, and like first episode done, I'm like, holy shit, this show is amazing.
But you might not have been ready?
I think I'm ready.
Okay.
I think I'm good.
Okay.
I'm going away this weekend for my boyfriend's like family birthday celebrations. And I'm just imagining myself like hiding away in one of the rooms watching Preacher, which is extremely loud, and there's like swearing and gunshots and like screaming and wailing. And like most of these people have only met me once or twice, maybe never. And they're gonna be like, what
Great
the
first
hell
impressions,
is she
especially with the
doing
boyfriend's
in that
family.
room? So yeah, so I'm watching through Preacher, and then on the flip side, I just started Disenchantment, the new Matt. I can't remember his last name.
Matt Groening.
See, I was going to say Matt Groening, which I know is the joke in The Simpsons. Like when he writes out his name, it's Groening. So in my head, that's just always stuck in there. Yeah, I watched the first episode of that. Fully prepared to hate it, but actually really enjoyed it. So looking forward to that.
It's a good one. I know we talked about it before. I was pleasantly surprised with where it went.
I don't know anything about this.
It's good. Well, are you, living in a house previously with rabid Simpsons fans, are you familiar with, like, Simpsons and Futurama?
Yeah.
So it's basically Matt Groening and the crew basically building this world of newly lovable characters in sort of a sword and sorcery medieval setting.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's like, it's kind of formulaic for what they do, but it takes it in different directions. Like, some of the jokes are, like, there, but that's kind of
you
what
want
they
that
do.
To some degree.
Yeah.
That's why you're there. Yeah.
I feel like the animation in it is really good. Like, I enjoy some of the direction of it better. They have this cool, like, opening scene, like, where you see the castle, and then it does that, I don't know what it's called, but, like, the castle sort of spins in the frame.
Yeah, there's a lot of really cool 3D animated set fixtures that they, like, a lot of, like, the panning and zooming of, like, settings is all done probably in 3D versus, like, some of the traditional stuff that they do for the character animation.
Yeah, I like stuff like that, because it would happen, and I would just sort of, like, pause and be like, that was really pretty. Like, it's basically a throwaway scene for them, but I'm like, I appreciated that you did that.
You should look up, there was an animated show, it didn't last long, it was on Adult Swim years ago, that was based on Tony Millionaire's Sock Monkey and Drinky Crow series. It was a comic book that got made into this animated series. It was sort of the same deal with this interesting combination of like a 2D look, sort of a cel-shaded look wrapped around 3D characters and 3D settings. But you would love it because it's pretty dark. Like, the crow is constantly drinking and he gets, like, dead drunk. And then the sock monkey... Or no, maybe the crow is always trying to kill himself and the sock monkey's always trying to talk him out of it. But they basically get shanghaied onto a pirate ship and they're traveling the seas and they're constantly getting, like, venereal diseases and, like, jaundice and, like, other things that happen when they're on the pirate ship. It's a really weird show, but it's kind of the same sort of... Not like the Simpsons style, but, like, the same kind of animation style. It's pretty fun.
Nice. Add that to the list.
But yeah.
What are you drinking? What are you watching?
I'm drinking a beer with a lobster on it. It is Narragansett's Fresh Catch. This is the first beer I've had in like a couple weeks because I'm still getting over my cold. I thought it was going to be lobster flavored, but I guess it's an ale that just has citrus in it, which is probably good for me too, so I don't get jaundice, and vitamin C always helps me. Yeah, scurvy, that's what I was thinking of, yeah. But yeah, what I've been watching is Dark Tourist, which is a series on Netflix. It is a show that is curated and kind of hosted by this gentleman. I can't remember his name, but he did a previous documentary that the three of us watched and loved called Tickled. Which is
that was him? I didn't even know that.
Yeah, it's the same dude. And yeah, so if you've seen that one, if you haven't seen that one, definitely check it out. It's weird. It's basically about this international conspiracy about people who contact random people on the internet and invite them, like people who are hard on their luck and need money. They will pay them ludicrous amounts of money or give them like crazy prizes to basically come and participate in this really intense tickling competition. And then if they like try to get out of it or if they try to find out anything about them, the people who organize it basically ruin their lives. But they claim it's not anything to do with, it's not sexual, it's not pornographic, but it's
always young, jacked dudes for some reason.
So. They also insist it's not gay in any way whatsoever, and it's if you haven't seen Tickled, I'm not going to say any more, you have to check it out. It's a really interesting documentary. It's very bizarre. So this guy did that, gained a lot of fame, toured the show circuit with that movie and did great, and now he has the show Dark Tourist, where basically he's going around the world participating in what's considered dark tourism, and basically what that means is people who take vacations to look at and check out really morbid shit. So I'm a few episodes in, like for example, I think the first one is he visits Colombia, Medellin, Colombia, and he goes through all the places where Pablo Escobar killed people. He talks with Pablo Escobar's head assassin, and there's like these really weird, kind of funny, kind of terrifying interviews. He also has an experience where he pays to go on a tour that basically shows you what it's like to illegally immigrate into the U.S. for people in Mexico, and that's pretty terrifying. Just the fact that people pay to see what it's like or go on like a tour to try that, it's like a really weird episode. But then one of the ones that I was just telling Maddox about was they go to Fukushima, and they're already doing tours of Fukushima, even though it's not remotely alright to be there. The radiation levels are still super high, and that's kind of the funny part of the episode is they go there, and there's just these old people, there's these young people, and when they have their little Geiger counters that are given on the tour, and the readings like spike, they're surprised. And then the tour guide's like, oh, do we want to go back? And they're like, oh, but we've only been going for like a half hour. No refunds. And it's it's really kind of fun. It's like really dark, but he kind of puts like sort of a funny kind of bent on it, and it's really informative and shot really well and from a very interesting angle. So if you get a chance, check that out. I haven't finished it yet, so I don't know what else he gets up to.
Have you watched the New Orleans one yet?
I don't think so. Oh. What does he do in New Orleans?
See, I've been skipping around on that one because they're not connected anyway. Yeah. He goes and hangs out with vampires, like people who like live as vampires. Yeah. They seem very nice.
That's not to spoil anything in Preacher, but there is a coven of New Orleans vampires that Cassidy sort of befriends in the third season. That's like it's a like amazing setup. I don't know where it's going yet, but like just the lean into it, I think you're really going to enjoy. Nice. Yeah, maybe we should do that. Maybe our next episode we should just take a trip to New Orleans and like hang out with vampires.
See what we can get into. Yeah. I mean, there's.
Weren't you going to move there at one point?
Yeah, I was. I was like minutes away.
But the humidity there is even worse.
I know. I can't even handle it here.
But we were also really excited because we're like, if Christy moves to New Orleans, then we have a place to stay.
Right. I know.
So I'm pretty sure we got drunk one night and we're like planning out our trip. based on you
Move
moving,
into
and then
my
you move.
location. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so
it can
now-
still happen.
Yeah, I mean, we can easily get down there either way, you know.
No, we can only go if Kristen moves there.
and becomes a vampire.
Yeah.
I'm not against sleeping in a gutter. Just going to put that out there for anybody listening who might live in New Orleans.
It's also very inexpensive to travel to. Just
True, but let's
the
put that
normal
out
way.
there.
But
Alright,
you know,
fine.
whatever.
So normally at the end of every episode, I ask you guys to think about contributing to our Patreon. But if we have any listeners who are currently living in, on, or around New Orleans and would love to sponsor two lovely ladies and a kind of alright dude for like a weekend or something, let us know. Reach out and let us know. We'd love to meet our fans, possibly have them join us for a podcast. Yeah, we'll make it worth your while. I'm winking. You can't see it because this is an audio format.
No, he's not.
I didn't wink. I'm lying to the listeners.
Already lying.
Ugh, I can't even feel half my face. That's probably why I'm not winking. Well, to bring it back around from this long sidetrack of vacation planning that this just turned into, what we're here to talk about, to get into it, to get into the nitty-gritty meat and bone of this episode, is another uber dry, educational, supernatural, funky, weird documentary that came out a few years back about the Bridgewater Triangle. Now, has anybody actually been in the Bridgewater Triangle? Have you been to any part that was discussed in the movie that was contained within that geographic area?
Unknowingly, yeah.
Okay.
Like, I've never gone to, like, investigate or been, like, aware. Like, I knew of the Bridgewater Triangle pretty soon after moving here, but didn't know the geography of it.
Okay.
Until
Knew it was a triangle.
I
Didn't
knew
know
it
where
was
the
a
triangle
triangle.
was.
I didn't know how big the triangle was. I didn't know where it was other than somewhere around Bridgewater.
Could be an isosceles triangle. Could be whatever those other ones were.
Acute.
That's
No,
an angle.
Geometry.
It could be a cute triangle, though. I might want to take that triangle on a date.
Anyway, I didn't realize how big it was until I watched this documentary. So I guess I have been there for totally different reasons and
Okay.
never realized it.
And you also, Maddox, have accidentally been within the triangle?
I mean, I've like intentionally been there. Like I've hiked around the swamp they talk about. I'm
Oh,
pretty sure
really?
I've camped in it.
But did you know that it
times.
was like a weird spot?
No, I had never heard of that before.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, when they said this was a legendary area, I was like, what?
See, I remember hearing about, because like I've been up here now for like, I don't know, too long. But I remember hearing about it in college and thinking like, oh, that's weird. Like I never really thought like I'd want to go out there. But listeners, to preface this, the Bridgewater Triangle is basically like the Bermuda Triangle. Weird shit happens there, but it's a chunk of land in Massachusetts where people see Bigfoots, people see weird shit. There's cults, there's what else? UFOs.
Like,
there's been strange
weird
murders. There's
hairy
been
men.
Satanic rituals.
yeah, all kind of weird shit. So, you know, when we saw a documentary about that, that was right up our alley. We figured we'd jump on it.
Keep it local.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe we'll have a follow-up episode one day where we actually go out there and start bugging people about it. But also,
who's in there? Well, we'll
I mean,
get
Swamp
there, I
Thing,
guess.
potentially. A lot of old white people, seems like.
Yeah.
A lot of old white dudes in fedoras. There were a lot of fedoras.
Yes,
in
there were a
this
lot of
movie.
funky hats.
Yeah. My two initial thoughts were that they were all like rejected Magic the Gathering players.
Yeah.
like I got kicked out of the thing, and then my second thought was that they should hire you to do their headshots because they all had like really
They all had-
terrible professional photos.
Yes.
I was just like, oh,
The one guy who was like, I'm a musician. Here's a picture of me playing the guitar. Yeah, but we can't really see your face because you're squinting so hard playing the guitar, so how can we tell that's really you?
And also, what does that have to do with like literally anything else in the documentary?
Or some of them look like dating profile shot. Like
Yeah.
it was kind of like the production of the documentary was kind of off. Like not terrible. Like it's still a great presentation, but like some of that stuff kind of fell to the wind, if you will. I wasn't a big fan of the intercut illustration of certain things. It was, you know, I mean, I kind of wish, I guess that's my dream job, is doing little illustrations for this movie, so maybe
For
if
this
they,
movie.
for this movie,
specifically.
if they make a,
We can do it.
if they make a sequel, maybe I'll jump on that train. But yeah, I haven't actually been out that way. That whole part of Massachusetts is just to me like dead, no man's land. Like I don't think I've been all the way out that way.
Yeah, there's...
Is that technically Western Mass?
No, it's southeastern Mass. So this was
I've
in
been
my
down
notes.
that way. I just haven't been over that
actually.
way.
So I drew a picture of the Bridgewater Triangle, and the top point is Abington. Then the left corner is Rehoboth. And then the opposite corner is Freetown.
Okay.
It's such a weird area.
Unless you, like, know somebody who lives down there and you're, like, going to hang out with them, you would probably not end up there for any reason.
That's the thing, is like, yeah, I thought the same thing. Is like, I haven't been out that way because I haven't had a reason to go out there.
Yeah.
But there is some cool stuff. Like, we were talking about there's a lot of historical stuff out there. I was even looking at a list of most haunted, like, houses in New England and Massachusetts, and a lot of them are kind of, like, out in that area, or, like, the Lizzie Borden house is out that way, and that's technically within the triangle. But I guess I just don't have the initiative. I have a car, I just haven't gone.
There's no reason to.
Shortly after this episode was recorded, Andrew took a road trip out to the Bridgewater Triangle and was never seen or heard from again.
You're just covering because we know you've been there. You were in the documentary.
Oh,
They had your image.
Yeah.
In it, so
should we talk about that now?
I think we should. I think we're jumping around a lot, but I think that's a good segue. I think, let's talk about how I was in this movie.
Okay. We're going to start from the beginning. So there's apparently a ghost hitchhiker on some dirt road.
I'm not a ghost. Spoilers.
Prove it. On some dirt road in the Bridgewater Triangle, and apparently if you have to stop, right, and turn your headlights off.
Turn your lights off and then turn them back on.
And he'll be there.
Yeah.
But then it said also if you're just driving on that freeway and you have 3 people in your car, he'll show up in like the empty seat.
Yeah.
And that was when they had like their hilarious graphic that was just like a cutout, basically, like rising in the seat, but like, hey.
Well, I like the dramatic reenactments in that part were great too, because it was just the guy doing like dramatic turns to like the passengers in the back seat and like just looking really.
So the guy in the dramatic reenactment just looked like your stock like Alston guy that is like beanie and a huge beard and a plaid shirt and is like, yo, can I get a ride home from the show? And he just gets in your car without asking.
Villain hipster lumberjack guy.
Yeah. Which I thought was hilariously appropriate for the region. And then the animation looked like you.
The illustrations that I was complaining about, but this one is actually really good because it's a fairly good likeness of me, so I might get it framed. But it was weird because we basically all chose the same night to watch it, but we were watching it separately, and we were all texting each other during the movie, and Chrissy was ahead of the game on most of it, and she was telling us all about it ahead of the time, and then she sent a picture, and then I couldn't believe my eyes because then I saw it on my TV. It was really weird. But yeah, so I'm a movie star now. The jig is up. I can't hitchhike anymore. Y'all know that I've been a ghost the whole time.
Yep.
Haley Joel Osment wasn't here to tell you guys. But yeah, let's get this train derailment back on the tracks a little bit. No, it's fine. It's a good segue because essentially explaining that the Bridgewater Triangle is a weird place. The documentary basically begins explaining what it is, and then we're introduced to a plethora of characters, of people, if you will. And I was telling you guys, I hope that you remember the names because I can't remember any of these dudes' names. But they're all independent researchers, authors, artists, like other people who have seen or witnessed or have been researching this stuff for a really long time. One of the dudes is the dude, if you were familiar with the weird insert state name here books that they've done for pretty much every state in the Union at this point. I have a copy, I think, of Weird Maryland and Weird Massachusetts probably somewhere in the house. They're fun books. They basically list a lot of this stuff, but he had referenced in the movie that he did the Weird Massachusetts book. This movie is also a big peddling stage for a lot of these people. There's so many people who are like, check out my book! Look at this stuff that I did!
And then it cuts to just the cover of the book.
A picture of what
Yeah, and also on that, I feel like the font and all the book covers was terrible.
Yeah, they're not really, none of them are designers, so
like,
that's
there
fine.
Was definitely some, like, Comic Sans and, like, other things going on, and I was just like, like, Chrissy needs to take your photos, and you need to go to, like,
you need to outsource some things.
I could design all these books.
Yeah. And I could just tell them how much they suck.
Yeah, there we go.
So, Done.
You'll be the editor, I'll be the designer, you'll be the photographer.
The editor is really just the person that tells you how much stuff sucks.
It stinks.
Oh, man.
But yeah, actually, funny that you mentioned that. I was on my way home walking past the church that's right across from that one pizza place. I walked past it so many times and I never noticed the church's sign is entirely in Comic Sans.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
You never noticed that?
that's unfortunate.
I don't know if Jesus would forgive that.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Too late.
So we're introduced to all these guys. You might, if you're in the scene or you're in the know and you do read these books and you follow along, you might know a lot of these guys by name, a lot of ghost hunter type people. But then it gets into sort of explaining how the prevailing theory is that the reason that the Bridgewater Triangle is cursed is because the white man shafted the Native Americans who originally lived here. And I guess we can start talking about that. Well, how did you guys feel about that? The presentation of that, sort of as like a starting point, having a bunch of old white guys telling us about how we did the Native American folk here real dirty.
It was weird. Like, it felt very much like they were reading off like the wiki page for King Philip's War.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is all like really like generic information. And at one point, one of the guys spoke, well, there was bad people on both sides, and I was just like,
Oh.
and I was like, oh, this is why white people shouldn't explain things like this.
The real monsters in the Bridgewater Triangle are us all along.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it was weird.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, like, who's left to explain it but these weird white guys, though? Because they're the only people that are left.
I'm sure it did come down to that where, like,
right.
They probably approached, I mean, I'd like to give them the benefit of the doubt that they did approach some Native Americans and were like, could we pay you to talk about this in our movie? Or, like, do you have an opinion on this? And they're probably like, no, leave us alone. Because at one point they do go to a reservation.
Right.
and then it's just like, they film the sign and they don't talk to anybody. And it's like, okay, well.
But, like, I really wouldn't blame any Native American for declining to be a part of this.
Yeah.
So I guess you get what you get.
They probably saw their headshots and saw the Comic Sans, so were like, no.
Yeah.
Well, also, I mean, if we're thinking about it that way, they also weren't able to interview any Bigfoots, big feet.
It's true.
Big feet.
Either. So
They were
like,
missing a lot of people.
But considering that there's all these things that they talk about in the movie that exist in this space, you didn't really see any real evidence. If you think about it,
there was that video that one guy took of the UFOs.
The UFO, that was interesting,
which was genuinely like not something I could identify. So I'll give him that.
Yeah, but I mean, that's
one of the things that did stand out to me. One of the dudes did quote at one point. He was like, "There was a time that I possibly saw lights in the sky that I believed to be a UFO. Could it have been a UFO? Possibly. Could it have been an airplane? Also possibly. But we possibly will never know." If he said possibly one more time, I was going to chuck my TV off the wall. But
I added that line to my quotes or my notes for the show. I was like, "What did you just say?"
Yeah,
it's like I love to believe in this stuff, and I do believe in cryptids, and I do believe in the existence of extraterrestrials, all that stuff. But I take it with a grain of salt. I am very skeptical at the same time, and I think the presentation in this movie is fair. But sometimes it does sort of lean into that, like, okay, well, I'd like more.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah. Well, I think there was just too much to cover because they're claiming everything under the sun.
Yeah.
And you can't really dig into any one thing like that much.
They did segment it, like, it was, like, segmented very well.
It
like,
was,
they didn't try to, like, mix, like, what we're doing right now.
But
it's
it
like,
had to be, like, very, very fast because they're like, we've got UFOs and ghosts and Bigfoot and anything you could ever think of. And it definitely is hard to dig too far into any one thing. I also thought that the investigators were, like, oddly selective about what they were skeptical about. Like, a lot of them were 100% convinced that Bigfoot or multiple big feet were in the Bridgewater Triangle.
Yeah.
But were pretty much like 100% like, no, there's definitely not any ghosts here.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what is it inside of you that makes you so convinced that Bigfoot is real, but ghosts can't be real? Like, I'm not buying it.
Like, that I can sort of understand from a standpoint of Bigfoot could technically be just like a really reclusive ape man animal. Like, he could exist
Sure.
just like you and me. Ghosts technically exist on another plane. Like, that's a whole other level of existence, like believing in the afterlife, believing in some, like, that disassociation for certain people I can understand. Like, I will blanket it all and just put it in the same basket. Like, I understand
I
that
do too.
And I want to believe, you know, Mulder style.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think you do get like a peppering of different beliefs in this movie, because you have certain researchers, and like, I don't know if anyone was pegged as a specific specialist, like if this was the Bigfoot specialist or if this was the ghost specialist, but you know, beyond that, they do get into some things that are more historical beyond just the history of the potential Native American curse on the area. And one of the more striking parts of the documentary, I thought, was when they do get into like the satanic cults, and the murders, and like that sort of like the true crime stuff.
Well, that's very much real.
Yeah,
so, like,
you don't have to
argue
prove
with
it
that.
actually happened. And then when they show like the creepy bunker that had the baby clothes in it, and the little house that like doesn't exist anymore, and then they actually went there, that was kind of cool. But you don't get there until like what feels like 6 hours into the documentary.
Yeah, it is at the very
They
end.
leave like the really good stuff for the end. But are there other parts that stuck out to you guys? Are there certain things that you wanted to highlight or talk about? I had a couple other things, but like I want to throw it out there.
So one thing, as one being on Team Scully and sort of the resident outdoors person on this podcast, like, I've been to this area a lot. Like, I've been to the swamp they mentioned. I've been to the state forest.
The Hockomock?
There's the pond start with an H, and then
Nippanikit.
and then there was like Freetown something state park.
The Freetown State Forest.
Yeah.
That's where like the cult activity was like strongest.
But for people like not from this area, like, it's not that big
No.
of an area, and it's not like the entire triangle is this like remote forest.
Yeah.
It's
No.
basically just like a smattering of small towns with
It's
this
a suburban
cute
area.
little swamp or forest in it. Like, it's sort of funny because like a lot of these areas, I'm like, yeah, this is like 5 miles from like a highway strip mall
Like
thing.
Target's
Like,
right
it's
there.
You're not remote. This is not the Colorado Rockies. This is not the Sierra Nevadas.
Yeah.
We're talking about a pretty isolated, small state park. And like the way that they would talk, they'd be like, "Oh man, I don't want to be out here at night." I'm like, "Really, dude?" Like,
But I mean, at the same time, like, there were those people that got killed out there. Like, they do talk about how brutal some of those murders were.
so, well, the murders didn't necessarily happen in the state park. Some of their bodies were found in the state park, so that's not anything
They didn't get
new.
murdered there. They were just found there.
Yeah, but it was like
Right.
the general like area. Like, they made it sound like it was very much connected to the area. And I was
Yeah.
like, you guys are stretching.
Well, I think the connection to the area was just that the group that murdered people like met in the park, right?
The nighttime is the right
Well,
time.
they met like in an apartment, like in one of the shitty towns in that triangle.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, there was
that's
the
where-
there was
what
the
was
apartment
the-
complex, and then there was something that was going on in the forest
Yeah.
too. Because remember
Like
they found
rituals. They were doing
Yeah.
animal sacrifices and stuff in
Yeah,
the
but
forest.
they never found any evidence of that.
No, well,
That
they
was
had
just people talking.
there were like 50, or not 50, there was like 20 some slaughtered calves. Remember, they did have pictures of that.
and dead birds.
I couldn't find any news record of any dead
So it
animals.
was just in the
area.
documentary.
Yeah.
Weird.
So
I
like,
wouldn't be surprised if they beefed some things up for the
yeah,
documentary.
a lot of the stuff like the guy who claimed that he saw like a big dog ripping the throats out of his little pony.
The dog was as big as a horse, like some sort of horse dog.
And then he changed it to pony, and then I was like, these like Shetland ponies, because Shetland ponies aren't that big, so
Midget
it's not
ponies?
that impressive. But yeah, I did like a quick Google search, and I found no records of any of this.
Huh.
So the only things that came up were like, documentary talks about mass history.
Yeah.
Like, I feel
And
like
it was
the-
about this documentary.
Yeah. I was like, so I'm skeptical on like animal mutilation stuff, and yeah, like the creepy bunker that had like the baby clothes and stuff in it. They never found anything else about that.
It could have just been a baby
yeah.
living in the wilderness.
Well, like I was also thinking when I moved to Cowtown in Vacaville when I was in high school, like the cool thing for kids to do was to go out to the Zodiac Shack, which was just this wooden shed on somebody's property, and people would leave creepy shit in it. At the same time, I was like, that creepy bunker with the kids' clothes could easily have been a bunch of teenager kids who were
just
like,
fucking around.
look at this abandoned place. What if we just left stuff here?
I didn't even think about that, but we used to do the same shit. Growing up, there was a forest down the street from my house that basically lined the peninsula, and we would wander in, and we found a crazy bamboo forest. Somebody had planted bamboo, and it just grew wild. And we would build, in the winter when the bamboo fell, we would build bamboo, like full bamboo huts. And we would leave them there, and then it made the news. It was like someone living in the forest. And it's like, no, this is just a bunch of kids fucking around. Like, it's not weird.
I mean, I grew up in a house that had a driveway that was about a half a mile long into the woods, and like just woods all around. And at the bottom of the driveway, there was a creepy abandoned shack that was just on our property since before we got there, and just left it there. And yeah, like kids would just hide in there and like drink and stuff. And my brother and I, when we were little kids, would like break in there and play. And there were like, you know, weird baby doll heads and stuff in there. And we were just like, someone was probably just messing with us.
True. It's like when, you know, there's kids that think, oh yeah, Satanism is cool, let's draw pentagrams, or
right.
Nobody likes Nazis, so let's draw incorrect swastikas everywhere. It's like the same sort of idea. So all these crime photos of people saying it's like Satanism, it's like, well, you know, like, I mean, there's a Church of Satan out in Salem now, but those people are cool. They're fine.
Yeah, I mean, that's mostly
sacrificing.
Yeah.
And they're mainly atheists who are just like, we're going to start a religion.
Right, yeah.
And that's the thing, is like, as spooky as they try to make this whole place sound, like it's nowhere near Salem, and Salem's pretty spooky. But yeah, I think it's enjoyable from that you can stand in a third-party position and watch this movie and let the movie kind of happen to you. And like, there's so many super-duper serious documentaries out there. Like, one of my favorite documentaries is Grizzly Man. Like, I can watch that documentary a million times, and it's like uber intense, well shot, very serious. But this one takes itself very seriously, but I can kind of laugh at it.
Yeah.
Because there was a segment about Thunderbirds, like the giant.
Yeah.
I've seen falcons flying around. I've seen rather large birds even flying around here. We had a bird, was it last summer or like a couple summers ago, that like picked up that poodle on the common? Do you remember that?
I did not hear anything about this.
Yeah, it made the news. There was like a big, it was like a, not like a, I don't know if it was an eagle or like a peregrine falcon or something like that, and it was picking up little dogs, and so they had signs around the common for a while that said beware, like, if you have small dogs and stuff. But that segment was kind of funny because it showed a couple renderings of like what these giant birds are supposed to look like, and they were like a little red, so they were like odd colored, and then there's like, and you know, people have said they have seen them, okay, bye, and then it just went on to the next thing, and it's like, all right, well, you wanted to mention that, but you really, really didn't have anything to like back that up. You didn't have anybody who's like, I've seen it. Like, the Bigfoot was probably the biggest part of, like, several people being like, I saw them, and then they disappeared. Yeah. Or, I smelled them. The one guy was like, I was walking around, and I smelled what smelled like a skunk. You were in the woods.
There's, yeah, like, it's perfectly reasonable that
or even, like, it could have just been kids smoking a bunch of pot in the woods. Like,
or that,
you know? But I would pay all my money to just walk out of my house one day, and the turkeys that congregate on our street just hanging out with a Bigfoot, that would be amazing. Like Bigfoot just playing with the turkeys. And I wouldn't even take a picture. I'd just be like, I'll remember that forever.
I'll talk about it in a documentary.
Yeah, I'll tell people about when I saw Bigfoot playing with turkeys.
When I'm old and I have a more expansive fedora collection. If I had to, like, briefly summarize this movie, or just, like, review it, I would say that it's, like, full of a lot of great information. As you were saying, we're not sure if it's true, but definitely learned a lot of facts either way. And the overall vibe of it, though, is very much like when you were in high school and you had a substitute teacher who didn't really want to teach anything, so would come in and like put a movie on,
yeah.
And you would just try to stay awake, and you're like, I'm actually getting a lot of information out of this, but I'm gone. Like, I fell asleep at the end of this movie.
So this is the Veggie Tales of documentaries?
Your substitute teachers were putting Veggie Tales
I went to private Catholic school.
Oh.
What?
Yeah, I guess that would be different. I forgot it had that religious bent. As it came out of my mouth, I was like, wait, that tomato was throwing Bibles at people.
Wait, really?
Yeah, that was pretty much all we watched whenever it was just like, hey, I don't have a lesson plan, here's VeggieTales.
In high school?
In high school, too, yeah.
Wow.
You guys were
I had
wondering
a
why I
very
was as
different
dumb as I am.
experience.
I learned so much from that tomato and that cucumber.
Ours, like, the movie that always got thrown on for me was Forrest Gump. God, I hated that movie.
Oh, for me, it was always random documentaries like this. Never really about paranormal stuff. It was always, like, something relevant to the class, but it was always just super dry, and they would lie to us and tell us there was going to be a test or something. But, yeah, so I guess we don't all share that experience.
And this is why it's great that we're all talking together.
You're like, it's just like VeggieTales.
What the fuck? So, tune in next time for our episode exclusively about VeggieTales here on Fear Boners. But yeah, there's just so many weird... like, I was telling you guys about how I was familiar with puck wedgies, and I just showed you guys that comic that I made about puck wedgies a few years ago, and that's something that I feel like when I was doing research on that whole mythological thing, it's mostly concentrated in, like, the Northeast and the tribes that settled here. Like, it's almost more of their belief that that is sort of like a trickster being. Like, you wouldn't necessarily, like, they might not exist in lore and myth in the Midwest or, like, the West Coast. And so I thought that was great that they talked about that.
Is it specific? Is that lore specific to the tribe?
Several tribes in, like, New England
Yeah.
have reference to them in their, like, stories. But when I was doing the research, I didn't find much else spread throughout the different...
Mm-hmm. What exactly... So I meant to look this up after I watched the documentary and forgot. Like, basic rundown, what is a puck wedgie?
So a puck wedgie is basically Danny DeVito from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. A tiny, little, creepy-looking dude. He has big ears, big nose, big eyes, covered in hair, pretty much, or like long hair, big hands, big feet, almost like a gremlin, but like more human, but sort of exaggerated features, and he's just constantly trying to play tricks or like steal things. They steal things a lot. But in the documentary, they do that interesting thing where they also talk about how people can be possessed by puck wedgies, and they do play that weird video.
Yeah, so that was another
that was kind
piece
of a weird
evidence.
Yeah, that was a good part of the documentary. It was like kind of weird, but then like when that dude just tackles the woman, there's a part where, you remember where the woman gets possessed by a puck wedgie and she starts walking backwards and like laughing and she falls over, and then the guy tackles her because she tries to like run away into the water. She's like right on the edge of a river or lake or something, and they're trying to keep her away from it.
Maddox is rolling her eyes right now. But
So corny.
It does seem a little bit like trumped up, like a Ghost Hunter's kind of like, did you hear that? What was that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is sort of creepy.
I don't know,
Like the part where
believe
she
it.
starts to laugh, like that's creepy, and then the dude tackles her, and I'm like, oh shit, like he's just crushing that woman.
But it was no.
You don't think it was real?
No.
But now
it was so corny and lame. Like, oh, we're gonna keep her in the light, but like not really, make it kind of creepy. And I just imagine like after they stopped filming them being like, oh, your laugh was so creepy. That was awesome.
It's gonna do great on the found footage forums.
I mean, the thing is that I don't feel like I can say that there's nothing going on in the Bridgewater Triangle just because this documentary was cheesy.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Like, they might have, but... I mean, in fairness, I haven't camped there, so I guess that's true. I guess, like, the way that I learned of the Bridgewater Triangle is when I first moved to Boston, and even, like, a little bit before that, because I'm not from, like, too far from here. I had a bunch of friends who grew up in Bridgewater and talked about it all the time. But, I mean, at this point, everybody's like 17, 18, 19, and they all have their own story, so I guess the credibility is questionable. But, like, I don't know, from my perspective, it has been like a given that it's real since I found out about it. So I guess that's why I'm like having a harder time like totally dismissing it.
Yeah.
I don't think these guys are going to sell anybody on the idea that there's UFOs and spirits there.
I mean, for these people, it is their way of life. It is how they make their living. They sell their books. They do
Do
tours.
they? You don't think that they have to like...
They probably have real jobs, but they probably make a decent living in their small towns, being like, hey,
Maybe.
here's I'm the guy that wrote this book. Because also it does kind of fall into that. I'm realizing that we sort of sat in an organization where it's like, you are the bigger believer, I'm kind of on the fence, and you're just like, no, fuck this shit.
It's bullshit.
But honestly, even growing up in like an area like I did, or when I first came up here, and hearing about the Bridgewater Triangle, it very much comes from small town, whisper down the lane type, like things are passed down and people hear stories and then people want to have their own stories and people sort of make things up. Like, there's this kind of stuff down in Maryland too. I think we have a goat man down in Maryland that people see all the time. Things like that where there's no documented evidence, but people will tell you, swear up and down that they saw it.
Yeah.
And that's cool. Like, I would love to believe in the existence of Bigfoot, of chupacabras, of the Jersey Devil, things like that, as terrifying as some of that is. But, like, I really just, you gotta wonder, like, in this day and age where everybody's got a camera on their phone, how come there hasn't been good documented evidence of this stuff at all at this point? But it's fun to think about, and it's fun to, you know, like, I feel like a lot of the ghost stuff they presented was probably the hardest to believe, or like, there wasn't any real ghostly evidence that was presented. The one where they were talking about the ghost lights, where the guy was like, we were standing on the bridge.
They were calling them... What was it?
Spook lights.
Spook lights.
Spook
and I was like,
lights.
what is that?
Yeah.
And at one point, the one guy does say swamp gas, and it's like, well, yeah, like, that is a thing that happens, but it could have just been some fucking fireflies, bro. You were standing on a bridge and you saw something, you thought it was a guy in a kayak with 3 flashlights. And then you were like, but then there was no kayak, so it must be spook lights. All right.
Yeah.
That's fine. It's, you know, people are allowed to have imaginations, and that's great. And people are always just telling stories. Like, people in their element are just born to tell stories.
Yeah.
But, yeah, some of the stuff just... It's weird because it does swing back and forth. Some of the stuff is super hokey. Some of the stuff is kind of funny. The dramatic reenactments are entertaining. But it just keeps coming back to the fact that these people are just trying to... Like, for me, it was just like, these people are just trying to make money. They're selling... They probably sold this movie. They sold a bunch of books afterward. They do ghost tours. They cleanse people's houses of spirits, that sort of stuff. And that's fine. Could you recommend people to watch this movie? And or venture out into the Bridgewater Triangle?
I honestly would only recommend this to people who live in the area or who have lived in the area. That was the
kind of
only
just like a
reason
funny, like...
why it was entertaining to me. Otherwise, it's no different than like Ghost Hunters or any of those other terrible series. But like, literally, if you go to these places, like, as soon as you get there, you'll be like, what?
Underwhelmed.
Yeah.
Like, we could take 20 people and just have them walk from the, like, outside perimeter inward. And you could probably do it in a day.
Yep.
Easily. And it's like, and then what? Is Bigfoot now also invisible? And, like, doesn't affect anything around him? Like, it's a small area.
We don't know the extent of Bigfoot's powers. He could have invisibility powers.
I mean, according to this thing, there are thunderbirds. There's, like, Bigfoot. There's the other, like, little hairy people.
The snakes. The giant snakes.
The giant snakes.
The stovepipe snakes.
Yeah, like, I was like, every time like they're listing off the things in this area, I'm like, guys, this is a really small forest.
Would you want one of those
like
imaginary stovepipe snakes?
Yeah, I mean, if I don't have to clean up their poop, then that'd be convenient.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts. You have to clean up. Like, you are the snake's
I don't want to
owner.
deal with like ghost poop. Like, I don't know how that whole thing
What do
works.
you
snakes
even
ghosts?
need to... Oh, I don't know.
I guess not.
I guess no.
No, this is
they
real
weren't.
poop. I'm cleaning real snake poop.
Yeah, the stovetop. I was like,
The stovetop snake.
I was like, what is this?
Yeah. That was another one where it was just like, yeah, people saw big snakes. Okay,
Bye.
next thing. Yeah. And the guy drew a picture of it. And it's like, all
I
right.
think there are also like cats that were mentioned.
Oh, the Mansfield Mystery Cat. I wrote that down with a lot of stars
that one was kind
next
of
to
described
it.
sort of funny too.
I just like the name.
Yeah.
I mean, if Josie got out in Alston, people would be like,
Everybody
did you see that big bitch?
It probably actually was Josie.
It's a panther.
She probably hitchhiked with Abbott out that area.
Mystery
and then,
solved.
like, went around, they fucked with a bunch of people, and...
Well, even that, like, a lot of the things could be explained with, like, illegal animal possession. Like, the stovepipe snakes could be just somebody somehow wound up with, like, an anaconda or something.
People see a 4-foot garter snake
Oh.
and be like,
exaggerated.
it's 12 feet long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also feel like every single one of the guys in this documentary feels like he has a foot-long dick.
Yes.
He's like, it is 12 inches.
I barely survived my
So
Bigfoot
they're
encounter.
seeing the snake by the same magnification.
Like that's just how.
How many dicks long would you say the snake was? Oh,
Well,
only
my
one.
dick.
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking about my dick or regular dicks.
I would say overall, this is kind of a situation, as are most of the documentaries that we watch, is that we watch it so these people don't have to.
Yeah, that's a
The
good point.
summary of it is great.
Yeah.
There's some great information, but it's not entertaining. You have to be ready to commit yourself to paying attention pretty hard.
Yeah.
So if this isn't something that you're already super into knowing about, it's not going to get you into it. If somebody's weird friend is making them watch it with them, they're not going to get sucked in.
And they're probably not going to be friends anymore after it.
Yeah, it's over. So if you want to maintain your friendships, don't force it.
Is this where both of you guys tell me that we're not friends anymore?
I
Yeah,
mean,
the next
it
thing
was
you
your
watch
idea.
has to be good.
Oh,
You
man.
made me watch
2 strikes.
really
2
good
strikes. Yeah, no, I kind of feel the same way. Like as you guys were talking about it, sort of felt like the same vibe that was when I grew up in Maryland and the first Blair Witch Project came out, because that was like,
yeah.
everybody was like, holy shit, Burkittsville, Maryland, people died there, like there's a witch there, like all this shit, and like it became such a tourist attraction. And then even then, when we saw the premiere of the new Blair Witch that was like the direct sequel, and I knew immediately what it was when they said Burkittsville, Maryland, even before they told us that it was a Blair Witch movie, and I was like, what the fuck, like why are they coming back here?
I was so excited about that.
It was fun. It was, well, it's not the movie we're talking about, but it was a cool experience. But I feel like that's the same feeling people in that area are like,
Sure.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
that documentary where made us look all like we're kooks and crazies and whatever. But I'm sure it's fun. I'm sure the areas like love it during the upcoming Halloween season. They
Yeah.
can probably play that up. It's probably really good for tourism.
Yeah. They're like the B-level Salem. They're like, Salem's really busy. You should come to the Bridgewater Triangle.
Okay, so now we're going to be the
Oh, man.
marketing and tourism
Yeah.
board for those small towns.
We can totally do a tour guide, guys.
Yes.
Could I be Bigfoot?
Yes?
You would be Littlefoot.
No.
Yeah, I guess.
No, you
The
would be
listeners
the little,
don't
the
know
little,
how short I
the
am.
little furry guy that tried to take the dude away.
Oh, yeah.
What did he say? He said he came up and he said, "Come with us." Come.
Yeah.
So, oh, man.
Okay, so here's a question. You got into this a little bit, but
Uh-huh.
what are some of the, like, prevalent, like, urban legends where you grew up?
Well, there was like I said, there's the Goat Man, and usually he hangs out like just outside the airport. Not like outside the airport, like waiting to
Is
get
he
picked
trying
up.
to pick
But, like,
somebody up?
no, but like there's a lot of woods and stuff in that area around like just outside of Baltimore. Stuff like that. I grew up down the street from like a bunch of abandoned buildings that the city basically built this park up and abandoned it almost immediately, and it just went to dust, and like it was just still there, locked up tight, but it looked very imposing. And so growing up, we basically spent every waking hour when we weren't in school trying to break into that building because we thought it was going to be something crazy and
Yeah.
weird and whatever, and we would break windows, we'd break locks, we'd try to pick locks, we'd do what we could to try to get in. It took almost like 5 or 6 years for us to finally get a door open, and when we got in, we found a mummified cat that probably got caught in there at one point, which was terrifying. We found, again, a bunch of pentagrams and poorly drawn swastikas spray painted all over the inside because clearly we weren't the first kids to get in there.
Right.
We found a partially devoured dildo. Wait.
Devoured.
I think an animal got to
Like
it. It was
nibble?
like gnawed on. Yeah. It was like probably chewed up by a raccoon or a fox or something. And then the weirdest thing we found were huge pallets of boxes of Jack Daniels. So they were Jack Daniels labeled boxes for handles of Jack Daniels, but when we opened them, they were player piano scrolls.
That's
which was
creepy.
really weird. But there
That's
must have been like
actually
almost
kinda
1,000 of them stacked, or more than 1,000 just stacked in the corner of this one room. So it was like an interesting find. It was kind of spooky. None of the lights were functioning, so we didn't go that much further in because we never had flashlights and we were all pussies. But that, of course, like as kids, we were just like, oh, there's a murderer that lives in there. Oh, there's a monster that lives in there. We were always just
You
terrified.
thought there was a murderer in there and you were trying to break in?
Yeah, we were
Okay.
we were dumb. We didn't have, like, that's the thing, is, like, again, going back to, like, small towns. Like, I didn't live in, like, a super small town, but it wasn't a city.
Yeah.
So we didn't have much to do, so
Right.
you tried to make life more exciting. We built bamboo huts and pretended to avoid... There was a guy that pulled a gun on us that place one time. That's a whole
that
other
was
story,
very
though.
That's a whole
real.
But yeah, you know, you try to make life exciting when you're a kid, and then you realize that when life is exciting in that way, it's terrifying, and then you just want to live a boring life.
Right. What
What about you,
you?
Maddox?
The only thing I remember as a kid, like the sort of myth ghost thing, was like Bloody Mary, which I think is pretty
Yeah,
well
that's a universal thing.
yeah, like we had like one like super creepy bathroom like on the playground at my school, which was really weird because it was like a private school, so my parents paid a fortune for me to go there. But there was still this like dark, damp, dirty bathroom in the playground. It's like that was like the mirror that you'd go and say her name. But like other than that, I think partly just because I grew up in like, the Bay Area of California, we've had a lot of serial killers
Yeah.
in that area.
Right.
Yeah.
You had a lot
And so-
of very real threats.
And so that was more of like the urban legends in the area, you know, it was like the Green River Killer, the Zodiac Killer, and like the Oakland Strangler. Like, there's so many in that area. Some of them were caught, some of them hadn't been.
Some of them might have been Bigfoot, some of them might have been aliens.
So no matter what town I lived in, there was always the shack, or like the tree, the parking lot, the apartment building. Like, there was always something that was connected to whatever serial killer had been active in that area. Like in Vacaville, I think we were probably like well outside of anywhere the Zodiac Killer had like dumped bodies, but they were still like close enough.
Yeah, I mean, I
shack.
agree with that.
So like that was like more of my urban legend childhood. It was much more related to like serial killers and like those type of threats, and not so much
The supernatural
stuff.
Yeah.
My brother did terrify me of it wasn't the basement, but it was like the lower level of my grandma's house, which we had always sent out this huge tent maze, like in the entire area. And in the back of that room, which was already kind of dark because it was like built into a hill and there was only one window, so there was no natural light really. The back of that room had a closet that had the furnace and like the grated style door, so you could sort of see into it. What he would do was like the way like I'd go through the maze tent, it would sort of open the back so I could see that door. And I don't know what he did. I think it was like a flashlight under a wig or something. But it basically looked like this like dark figure with glowing red eyes.
Oh, the old flashlight wig technique.
Yeah, and like and because it was through the door, you know, like I was really like I couldn't see anything.
Yeah.
And that terrified me.
Yeah, so the same kind of thing actually happened to me. There were a couple of urban legends, like where I grew up, that were really prominent just because the town that I grew up in was really boring. And one of them was called the Hookman of Hop Yard Road.
Oh.
And it's super, like, so there was this road, Hop Yard Road, where it was super pristine at for the first half of this road. It was like nicely paved, really nice uniform houses, and then like out of nowhere it becomes a dirt road and there's nothing there for a couple miles except just straight forest, which doesn't make any sense to begin with. And the story of Hop Yard Road was basically like your classic, this used to be Makeout Point in the 50s, and two teenagers drove down here to make out and heard a screeching, like scratching noise on the roof of the car. So the guy got out and went to see what it was, and then there's just blood spraying everywhere. Like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And my mom, basically, it was me, my brother, and it's important to note that this is not the first and only time that she ever did this to me as a child. She really enjoyed torturing me in her
Recurring
free
family
time.
trauma.
Yeah, but we were driving home from somewhere late at night, and it was my brother and I and, like, one of my friends, I think, and I must have been, like, 10 years old, and she was telling us this story and then went, whoops, I took a wrong turn. Look what road it is. And drove down this road, parked, turned the lights off, and she was like, the car is dead. And I was like, what? I'm 10.
I don't know how cars work.
I don't know how cars work. Immediately suspending all disbelief because I was like into this story and you know whatever. And she was like, "Okay, I'm gonna get out and check under the hood." And she jumps out of the car and starts, like, scratching the roof with her keys. Like, also, that fucks up your roof, but it was so worth it, apparently, for the
Mom
story.
was committed to the bit.
She was so committed to the bit, and we're all fucking freaking out. And then she starts screaming, and I'm like, oh my God, my mom is getting killed by the hook man. And then she just, like, hops back in the car and was like, gotcha.
Do-do-do.
I was like, what?
That's like Mom of the Year award.
Yeah,
Mom of the Century.
amazing.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
pretty
I'm
great.
not planning on having kids, but if I was, would probably be specifically to do stuff like that.
Oh,
So
yeah.
In retrospect, I can't blame her at all.
My kids will be like the Hereditary kids, just in a constant state of terror. Yeah. They'll be on their toes at all times. They'll never know when Dad's going to punk them or trick them or terrify them.
Well, I mean, and I would deliberately weird them out.
Yes.
Like, I would just come up with some completely different character to play when I was around your kids. And it would just
I
be
thought
very
you meant
weird.
you're like, I thought you were talking about your kids.
No.
We're talking about victimizing
Abbott's
Abbott's
kids.
My kids,
Yeah,
I'm
like
weird.
that.
My kids are going to be even more
Yeah.
weird because Aunt Chrissy and Aunt Maddox are going to just fuck with them constantly.
I'm going to be lurking around every day.
I could come in and do something really weird, and then you can come in and do something equally weird, but, like, really different from what I did, and these kids would just
Not
be
going
like,
to be able to follow the storyline at all.
They're going to have like
I
the
don't
Guinness
know.
Book of World Records of like uncontrollable crying
yes.
or like nervous hiccups.
Well, I mean, they're just going to have a very skewed version of reality. They're not going to know what to believe anymore. So, I mean, good luck dealing with that.
Yeah, it'll be fine.
I don't plan on making any more money anytime soon. I don't see that happening. So I hope that you can find a 2-for-1 on therapy.
Oh, they'll be fine.
Yeah.
They'll be fine. Kids are made of rubber anyway, especially their brains.
We're gonna find out.
But yeah, well, thank you for sharing these traumatic life stories, you guys. But one thing I did want to get back into before we wrap this episode up, there was a moment in the movie, going back to this fantastic documentary
The
that
last
we watched.
moment in the movie. So good
Was it?
place
Is
for
it what
that
they
to come up.
abbreviated?
It was at the
Okay.
very end, yeah.
And so they're interviewing this guy, and he's sort of getting back into the whole Native American curse and like why it exists, and the whole belief that the curse may be broken if there's an artifact, a wampum belt, I believe is what they refer to, is returned to the site of the massacre or the death of King William or Prince William.
King Philip?
King Philip, yes, thank you. I was thinking British.
Those
like,
people are alive still.
and as he says that, a noise can be heard, and like one of the production lights goes out, and then there's like an awkward cut and like a pause, and then they go back, and it's probably like sort of almost to be presented like a goof, and they're like, "Oh yeah, man, I don't know if you noticed, but like as soon as you said that, like one of the lights went out," and then they all start nervous laughing, and then the guy kind of looks around and starts doing the whole ghost hunter, like, "Oh well, let us know your presence is here, but just so you know, if I could, I would return the belt myself." And then another light goes out, and it's in pitch black, and then they're all, like, nervously laughing, and it's, like, kind of, like, at the moment, it's like, oh, weird, but then the more I thought about it, it's like there could just be a dude standing off camera with a switch for the lights.
It's not hard to turn the light off, yeah.
But, like, what was, like, did you see that, and you were like, oh, cool way to end, or was it, like, corny from the beginning? I don't feel like I need the answer from Maddox. She's already shaking her head.
So corny.
But on the flip side, you know me, I believe everything the first time around. I need to, like, step away from it for a while.
Yeah.
To like, really analyze it.
Decompress, take our notes. You guys both came so prepared. I'm so proud of both of you. I literally took no notes. I was very distracted during the viewing of the movie, but I remember abbreviated parts, like points throughout the film that I was like, huh, okay. But yeah, you guys did some serious research.
I just needed to get through this.
Yeah.
I was like sitting there like
I
cracking
had to
up.
write to keep myself awake.
I was just like, I made really like random notes on here. At one point, I put in quotes, "It was erect."
There were a lot of phrasing moments throughout this movie.
Yeah.
That were questionable.
Her camera didn't work. How convenient.
Yeah, did you guys find it, like, beyond the fact that it was a bunch of dusty old white dudes and white dads telling us about the Native American struggle, then just the fact that there weren't that many women in the movie, and then when there were women presented in the movie, it was either, like, Lizzie Borden, prostitutes.
The one prostitute was also a pimp.
She was also a pimp. That was a good point. I did say that was kind of... I didn't know that you could be both a pimp and a prostitute, so that was pretty cool. She did technically murder somebody, so it's not great, but that was interesting.
Still a small business owner.
Small business owner, yeah. But then it was like the women that we did see either was the woman who got possessed by the Pukwudgie and was kind of portrayed as like kind of a bit of a jabroni character, and then also the one woman who they didn't even interview, they just showed a picture of her and then they're like, oh, her camera didn't work. So like I feel like that's almost just completely discounting the fact that there is also a female presence in the whole ghost hunting,
but probably
cryptid
not
hunting.
as many as men.
Well, yeah, and I mean the thing is that in the interview with with every investigator that they interviewed, they would acknowledge knowing all the other investigators like involved in the film.
Yeah.
So everyone all the dusty white dudes in this documentary knew each other.
Yeah.
It
did feel like a little bit of a boys' club.
It was a boys' club, and it could have been very much just orchestrated by this group of dudes that knew each other, is what it seemed like. They were all friends. Like, they talked about having investigated things with each other.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's not an excuse, but I was like, oh, this is like a very incestuous...
They all vouch for each other.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
They have, there's proof.
Right.
But now that I think about it, there were two separate instances of black gentlemen in this film who, one of the best interviews was with the dude who worked with the investigation team that worked at the time of all the satanic killings, and he sort of hammed it up a little bit at the end, but, like, his portrayal or retelling of some of those investigations were kind of chilling, like, because he was like, yeah, they did find some weird shit.
Yeah, but he would also be like, also, I didn't directly work on the case, I just worked in the department where those people worked.
Oh, did he? I didn't even notice. Okay, well.
It was one of those things that he, like, sort of slipped in, like, as, like, a clarification that he didn't actually work on the case to do anything.
But there was also the other dude who was a journalist.
But he had one of the funnier things, because it was him, it was the two journalists who were driving, and they saw the UFO, and they both had, like, recreations or things of it, and his lean into it was basically like, now I'm a really big baseball fan, and let me tell you that UFO
looked like
home plate. And then they just show like a floating home plate.
Yeah.
It's
My
like,
favorite thing was his friend. So this guy had his like colleague who he worked with, who he was in the car with when they saw this thing, and his friend had made like a cardboard replica
with a flashlight,
taped to it to like explain the story, and he's like flying it around like a little kid like playing with a toy, and like it was going like this and then I went like this.
I made a note about that guy. I said, oh, this guy's got props, he's clearly legit.
Yeah,
he's prepared. He's like Carrot Top. He knows what he's doing. He knows what it looked like. And, no, I think the part where he actually zoomed it into the camera, and the cameraman even kind of, like, was taken aback. He kind of, like, you saw it, like, flinch a little bit.
I was not expecting that.
I was not prepared. I wasn't ready. And then, again, like, the one guy we mentioned before who, again, with the UFOs was like, I have videos of the lights. And then you sort of see him, and it does, like, a little weird movement, but that's like, okay. All right.
Yeah, like, if your porch light was working, we could go down the stairs, point out cameras at it, and go, like...
and do shaky cam footage and zoom in super quick. So, that being said, before we get sucked in back into this glorious movie, because it's very easy to just keep talking about this movie, because there's so much presented in such a short amount of time. It's only an hour and a half. Check it out. It's on Amazon?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think
it's on Prime streaming.
I wouldn't pay for it, so if you have Prime...
Yes.
If you have Prime, it's free.
It's one of those ones that might even
Prime, don't pay for it.
It might even be available in parts on YouTube to watch.
I'm sure.
Or there's highlights. There's probably somebody did like a cut together of the highlights
first. So it's fair to say that.
So I don't know if I asked you guys this previously while we were recording. If I did, apologies, listeners, if we're repeating anything. But this documentary, The Bridgewater Triangle or Missing 411, who wins in a Jello wrestling match?
Ooh.
AKA, what was the better movie? Documentary.
I hate them both so much.
We're gonna let Maddox work this out first.
Okay.
I feel like I have to give it to the Missing 411 only because at least that is referring to generally like vast open areas.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't stress this enough. These forests they're talking about in the shitty one we just watched, the triangle one, like, they're so small. It's like you get 10 people and just...
Did anybody take a note of, like, did they ever say the whole landmass, the area of the Bridgewater
Yes,
Triangle?
actually, I do
But
have
even if
that
they
somewhere.
do, like, there's tons of small towns. So
Yeah.
it's not like that whole
It's broken
area.
up by very residential areas.
Yeah.
But it is 200 square miles.
That's not huge.
Yeah, and...
Broken up by strip malls.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and towns and, like, clear cutting,
Yeah.
so... Like, all these forests are basically their own little island.
Yeah. This is like if I basically wanted to make a documentary about that abandoned public rest facility in that park.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's why I have to give it to the 411 thing, because even though it was still preposterous and they had no evidence, they were totally, like, drawing stars, at least, like, alright, this is a big area. Like, people could walk into these, like, national parks that they were, like, talking about and just not be seen again.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is legit. Like, if you walk for more than a day in the forest that they're talking about in the Bridgewater Triangle one, you're going to run into a strip mall.
If you got lost in these forests, you probably should not have been able to leave the house in the first place.
Yeah, like, you're just walking around in a circle in the middle, and people are yelling your name, and you're like, nope, I'm lost in a forest.
yeah.
Busy being lost over here. Okay. Chrissy, what's your...
I don't disagree with anything that Maddox just said, but I think if you're taking the documentary in isolation,
Mm-hmm.
I got nothing out of Missing 411. I don't know what their point was at all. The production in Missing 411 was awesome.
Yeah.
Especially compared to the one, to the Bridgewater Triangle. But I kind of walked away being like, I didn't learn a goddamn thing about anything. And spent probably like 2 hours just Googling shit on my own. Which is kind of counterintuitive to what a documentary should be. And from this documentary, I at least took out some information and knew out of the gate, like, what they were trying to get at least. Like, I didn't spend the whole time being like, what is the punchline? Why are we watching this? So that's the only reason that I would say that this Bridgewater Triangle documentary would win in Jello Wrestling.
Well, I'm not going to be the deciding vote because
What?
I'm going to take a sharp left and say, while I appreciated all the research and presentation that occurred in the Bridgewater Triangle documentary and how it was presented, I did feel that Missing 411 was more well-produced. Like, I feel like there was more money thrown at it and the shots were more interesting and the little, like, the crime scene reinterpretations and stuff like that. And I did get kind of caught up in the whole true crime thing about whether the parents killed the kid or not.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're both pretty bad.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all agree on that.
Yeah, I couldn't pick between them, so I would probably, because I say, like, both of them have good parts and both of them have more bad parts. I would tell everybody to just go watch Grizzly Man, like I said before. Solid documentary. And I would consider it kind of a hard documentary, because when Timothy Treadwell gets eaten at the end,
It's horrifying.
you don't hear the sound, and it's brilliant because, I can't even think of the director, he's famous for this movie and other documentaries and other movies that he's made, but he's incredible in that he decides to listen to the tape of Timothy Treadwell being devoured by a bear, and you just see his sort of like, oh, this was a bad idea that he listened to the tape. Mm-hmm. And that part is like the payoff at the end of the movie. Spoilers if you haven't seen it or you didn't know that somebody got eaten by a bear. But also it's just great footage. It's, you know, whatever. I'm recommending a whole different movie, but it is kind of spooky. So yeah, a vote against, a vote for, and me being indecisive sitting on the fence.
That was a very avoidant answer, but okay.
Yeah, I didn't know that was an option.
Oh, no.
We're not here to help these people. We're just here to give them something to listen to on their lunch break or on their commute. Love you, listeners. But yeah, thank you, ladies, very much for coming here to talk about this mediocre documentary. We'll probably find another mediocre documentary to talk about soon. But, as always, tell the people where they can find more of your work, or if they want to stalk you in real life or on the internet. Chrissy, I'm going to let you begin.
So you want me to give them my address, or...
That's up to you. It's up to your level of comfort with strangers.
I'd rather not. I just didn't know if it was a requirement. I am a photographer when I'm not here. You can find me on Instagram at elsiekitesphoto. My website is elsiekites.com if you're looking for regular stuff. And if you want wedding photography, you should go to my wedding website at matchboxstudiosPhoto.com.
There you go. If any listeners are getting married anytime soon, check her stuff out. She's very good. I've been married several times, and she's photographed all of my shotgun weddings.
Yeah, like, I wouldn't say I'm a good luck charm by any sense.
But your photos were like goddamn.
Oh, man. I look like
you
a
just
Adonis.
have to get married over and over again to get more photos.
Yeah, practice makes perfect.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Maddox? Where are you at on the internet these days?
Well, I technically am on Twitter at smaddox42, but I don't do that. It's too much work. It's too much pressure. It's like I follow people, but I have like a very sporadic amount of tweets.
You had a few brushes with fame recently.
Well, it's because it was Gail Simone.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my god, it's Gail Simone! So I almost retired my Twitter account after that.
Finish on top.
Yeah, I was like, this is my high achievement in life. Other than that, I have an Instagram feed at Perpetually Lost Photography, where I wander around national state parks at night and during the day. Usually lost, but haven't gotten murdered yet.
Haven't encountered any Bigfoots.
I mean, we'll see. I'm going to Tahoe this weekend, so I feel like Bigfoot would probably be priced out of Tahoe at this point. Like, he'd probably more like out past Reno, maybe. Like, can't afford that area.
You probably run into those like mostly shaved man bun Bigfoots out there.
Yeah, and they would probably tell me to get off the property. They're like, you're too shady. Like, take your camera and go.
You just have to call the cops immediately.
Yeah. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
All right, great. Well, that's about going to wrap it up, guys. Thank you so much, dear listeners, for tuning in for another episode of Fear Boners, presented by the Down in Front Podcast. If you've liked what you've heard, you can find more over on downinfrontpodcast.com. We also have a Twitter that is _DIFP. That's going to be the main Down in Front Podcast Twitter. You can also find us for the Fear Boners Twitter at FearBonersDIFP. You can also email us directly either at thecrew@downinfrontpodcast.com or fearbonersdifp@gmail.com. We also have a Facebook page where you can see where we post some of our most recent episodes. We're also over on YouTube where we share our video teaser and also full episodes as well. We also have the return of the Gamescast where you can watch us streaming videos over on Twitch at twitch.tv/downinfrontpodcast. And dear listeners, as always, if you do enjoy what you listen to, we do it for absolutely free because we love you guys, we love movies, and we love having this ongoing conversation with you. It's fun, but it does take time, it does take money to a certain degree, and if you want to learn more about how you can help us get these episodes produced and put out on time so you have more content to listen to on your commute or on your lunch break, what have you, pop on over to patreon.com/downinfrontpodcast and you can learn more about potentially donating. Even $1 a month is a great help, and it means the world to us. We really appreciate even just going over and checking it out because there are benefits for people who contribute to Patreon to help us get our content out to you guys. So yeah, feel free to check that out. And again, thanks so much for tuning into Fear Boners with Andrew, Chrissy, and Maddox, and we will be back sooner rather than later. But in the meantime, stay spooky and keep it creepy.
Bye.
Bye.